In the early morning of January 3, 2015, a young woman rushed frantically to the Liwan City Police Station in Hubei Province, China, to report a crime. Her face was pale with shock from the horrifying scene she had just witnessed. She told officers that her neighbor's family was lying motionless in pools of blood. Immediately upon receiving the report, police arrived at the scene. The two-story newly built house was located in a small village and belonged to Mr. Xiang and his wife Zhou. When investigators entered the home, they were horrified by the gruesome scene. In the upstairs bedroom, the bodies of Mr. Xiang and Mrs. Zhou lay on the bed in different positions, surrounded by blood, with furniture scattered violently throughout the room. The victim's family consisted of 3 people: Mr. Xiang, his wife Zhou, and their young son named Xiaoyong. Fortunately, 11-year-old Xiaoyong, though severely injured and in a coma, was quickly rushed to the local hospital for emergency treatment. Initial autopsy results showed that the cause of death for the couple was severe head trauma from being attacked with a heavy object. Evidence on the victims' bodies proved they were attacked suddenly while still in bed, with no time to resist or defend themselves. Soon after, a blood-stained hammer was found under the victim's bed. Family members confirmed that this hammer belonged to the household. After examining the crime scene, police discovered that every room in the victim's house had been ransacked and searched chaotically, with clothes scattered everywhere. On the rooftop of the house, they found a pair of relatively new gloves and a flashlight. Neither item had any notable fingerprints. Later forensic analysis showed that the gloves contained DNA from the victims themselves, indicating that the perpetrator had worn them during the commission of the crime. Another investigation team examined the doors and windows of the house and noticed something unusual. The front door on the first floor was locked from the inside, showing no signs of forced entry. This indicated that the suspect did not break in through the front door. So how did the perpetrator enter the house? Police quickly found clues at the back of the house. On the aluminum window frame, they discovered scratch marks pointing upward, proving that someone had climbed through there. Although they couldn't determine the size or direction of footprints, these traces were very fresh, showing that someone had recently climbed through this area. Mr. Xiang's house was located at the foot of a small hill. From the hillside behind, one could completely climb up to the rooftop through the rear window. Based on this circumstance, police speculated that the suspect might have been very familiar with the structure of Mr. Xiang's house. However, despite thoroughly searching the rooftop and all rooms, police found no fingerprints or footprints from the suspect. This further reinforced the assessment that the perpetrator had prepared thoroughly, possibly wearing gloves and shoe covers to avoid leaving traces. Combining all evidence from the scene, the undamaged door, gloves, and flashlight left on the rooftop, climbing traces at the rear window, police had outlined the entire process of the perpetrator's crime. The suspect had climbed the wall to the rooftop, then broke into the house. After committing the crime, they returned to the rooftop, discarded the gloves, then jumped down the back hillside and escaped from the scene. This horrific murder case left the villagers extremely panicked and frightened. Police began investigating the motive for the crime. Was this a case of personal revenge or robbery murder? The method of the crime showed that the suspect had prepared in advance and acted very ruthlessly, even refusing to spare the child, seemingly not wanting to leave any living witnesses. All the victim's wounds were concentrated on the head area, clearly showing an intent to kill. Police began investigating the character of Mr. Xiang and Mrs. Zhou. Everyone in the village confirmed they were kind, honest people who had never caused conflicts or disputes with anyone. Mr. Xiang had a leg disability while Mrs. Zhou had an eye disability. Neither had the ability to provoke others. Their eldest son had gone to work far away and rarely came home, while Xiaoyong was attending elementary school locally. Their life was very private, revolving only around farming, rarely leaving the village, and there had never been any rumors of extramarital affairs. Therefore, the possibility of a revenge or romantic crime was quickly ruled out. If it wasn't revenge or romance, then it was very likely a robbery. The evidence of ransacking throughout the house suggested this. However, several major contradictions emerged. Mr. Xiang's family had just built a new house, which might have made criminals mistakenly think they were wealthy, But upon deeper investigation, police discovered that Mr. Xiang's family was actually one of the poorest households in the village, living on government subsidies and meager income from growing coptis, a medicinal herb. This new house was built mainly through financial help from Mr. Xiang's sisters and loans from relatives and friends. They had only moved in 2 months prior. When police entered the house, they noticed it was almost empty, with few valuable possessions, and even clothes were stored in cardboard boxes. This reality made the robbery hypothesis confusing. Someone familiar with Mr. Xiang's difficult circumstances would never target them for robbery. Could this have been a crime committed by transient criminals, people unfamiliar with the victim's family, but deceived by the appearance of the new house? According to the memories of older residents in the area, Jianan town had never experienced a similar robbery-murder case in the past 15 years, especially in such a remote village. However, police also noticed that Jianan town's location had some characteristics suitable for transient crime. There were several small roads leading directly to Chongqing City, easily accessible by motorcycle or car, convenient for those wanting to scout remote locations for nighttime crimes. Mr. Xiang's village was also in a quite visible location, less than 1.2 miles from the main road. Just by taking this small road, Mr. Xiang's house was the first one encountered. Next to it was only his brother's house, while other neighbors were all at least 330 feet away. Despite their poor circumstances, from the outside, this new house appeared more prosperous than surrounding homes, potentially making transient criminals mistakenly believe the family had money. Based on these characteristics, police initially concluded that this was very likely a robbery-murder committed by transient criminals. But if this was indeed the case, who was the suspect, and had they already fled the area? Initial reports showed the crime occurred between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. on January 2nd. During this time period, police found no witnesses. Were there any surveillance cameras that could provide clues? There were no cameras at the crime scene, and a camera in the nearby small town had very poor quality, unable to provide useful information. Reviewing all cameras on major roads and neighboring towns would be an enormous workload, nearly impossible. Therefore, the case seemed to reach a dead end. At that time, the most important clue and greatest hope for police was Xiang. The 11-year-old boy had fortunately survived and was the only direct witness to the case. At this point, Xiang was receiving dedicated medical care at the hospital for his serious injuries. Could police gather valuable information from him? Doctors said that when Xiang was brought to the hospital, he was in a deep coma. However, after emergency efforts, he had passed the critical stage and quickly regained consciousness. Immediately, police went to the hospital to meet with Xiang. He recounted what he remembered about the night the crime occurred. Xiang didn't remember the specific time, but he said that on the evening of that day, suddenly 2 or 3 strangers came to their house. One of them had blonde hair. They rushed into the house without saying a word, then attacked the family and robbed money. Xiang's testimony shocked the police. This indicated it was an organized crime committed by a group of people. Xiang also confirmed he didn't know any of these people at all. This reinforced the hypothesis about transient criminals. Based on his description, police immediately deployed search operations, looking for young people with similar characteristics. Just then, police received important information from a truck driver. This person said that on the very day the crime occurred, he had seen about 4 young people with blonde hair, riding 2 motorcycles and blocking the road near the crime scene. The truck driver's testimony further heightened suspicion about this group of young people, as they completely matched what Xiang had described. Meanwhile, another investigation team found some cigarette butts and fruit peels on the hillside behind Mr. Xiang's house. This made police suspect that the perpetrators might have hidden here, waiting for the right opportunity. They also questioned villagers, and all confirmed that no one in the village regularly came to this hillside area to eat or smoke. This evidence further reinforced the truck driver's testimony, suggesting that the group of young people might have been loitering around the area. With these clues, police felt very excited, as if the case was about to be solved. They conducted a large-scale search in Jianan town and surrounding areas to track down the 4 suspects and 2 motorcycles. In a short time, police had obtained information about this group of young people. Near the crime scene was a middle school, and a 7th-grade student had had a conflict with another student. To resolve the conflict, he had called 3 or 4 friends to help. Police confirmed that this group was exactly the people the truck driver had seen. Their names and addresses were quickly identified. All the elements matched: motorcycles, blonde hair, delinquent youth. Police believed the case had been solved. However, the subsequent investigation results were extremely disappointing. These 4 people had absolutely no time or motive to commit the crime. Although they had appeared near the crime scene, they were only there for a short time and had ridden their motorcycles back to Madao Town around 9 p.m. This was witnessed by many people. If this group of young people wasn't the perpetrator, how could Xiaoyang's testimony be explained? He was the only survivor and direct witness to the case. Police once again went to the hospital to meet with Xiaoyang. When police asked him how he knew the criminals arrived by car, while according to his own account he was sleeping in bed at the time, Xiaoyang was completely unable to answer. At this point, police began to doubt Xiaoyang's testimony. Although he was the most important witness, something seemed wrong. How had this happened? Police decided to be very careful in solving the case and needed to recreate the sequence of events to find the truth. After discussion, they decided to conduct a nighttime scene experiment, recreating the situation according to Xiaoyang's account. The results of the experiment surprised the police. From Xiaoyang's room, they absolutely could not see any vehicles outside or the road below. Even with bright lights shining or no lights in the room, visibility remained limited. This showed that Xiaoyang could not have seen motorcycles or cars from his room. Especially without interior lighting, he absolutely could not have clearly seen characteristics like blonde hair, as he had described. Police conducted the experiment at Mr. Xiang's house at the exact time the crime occurred, and the results showed the actual situation was far different from Xiaoyang's account. Why had Xiaoyang testified this way? Police asked the doctors for an explanation. The doctor explained that because Xiaoyang had suffered serious head trauma and major psychological shock, this could cause confusion in his perception. In the short time after the injury, his statements might not be completely accurate. Thus, Xiaoyang very likely had thought disorders due to head trauma, leading him to confuse images of blonde-haired people he had seen during the day in the village with his horrific nighttime experience. This explained his contradictory testimony. Based on these results, Lijuan City Police decided to dismiss all of Xiaoyang's testimony. This meant the investigation was back at a dead end, and they had to completely change their investigation direction, seeking a new breakthrough. So where should they start next? After thorough discussion, police decided the first thing to do was determine whether this was a crime committed by transient criminals or by a local person. This was key to directing the next steps. Police reanalyzed the characteristics of the case. If it were transient criminals, they would likely break in by forcing the front door lock, using crowbars or other tools to open the door. Moreover, professional robbers usually bring their own weapons, not using items available at the scene. After committing the crime, they would quickly flee the scene without needing to go up to the rooftop or hide on the hillside. Based on these analyses, police realized the likelihood of this being a crime committed by transient criminals was very low. With this conclusion, police shifted focus to local residents, especially those familiar with the victim's family. They began thoroughly investigating relationships and people around Mr. Xiang and Madame Zhou. Just then, a villager provided important information. Mr. Wang, Mr. Xiang's neighbor, had gone to the town bank to withdraw money on the very day the crime occurred. After withdrawing money, Mr. Wang had visited Mr. Xiang's house for a while, and that very night, Mr. Xiang and his wife were murdered. Could there be any connection here? Could Mr. Wang have been followed from the bank home, and had these people mistaken Mr. Xiang's house for Mr. Wang's house, leading them to attack the victim's family? If this hypothesis was correct, the suspect would have had enough time to observe the location and structure of Mr. Xiang's house, waiting until evening to act. Police immediately investigated Mr. Wang's route that day, collecting surveillance video from the bank and the bus he had taken. However, after repeatedly reviewing the footage, police discovered no signs of Mr. Wang being followed. This proved that no one had followed Mr. Wang and mistaken the crime location. This hypothesis was rejected. Although the clue about Mr. Wang didn't lead to results, it opened up a new direction of investigation for police. If it were a local person committing the crime, would anyone target a poor family with no assets like Mr. Xiang's family for robbery? This seemed illogical, unless they knew the family had just come into a large sum of money at that time. Thinking of this, police immediately began investigating all of Mr. Xiang's family income sources in recent months to see if they had suddenly acquired a large amount of money. And indeed, they made an important discovery. About a month before the crime occurred, Mr. Xiang's family had received money from selling copies. To have money for building the house, Mr. Xiang's family had borrowed quite a bit of money for construction materials. To pay off debts, they had sold their harvested copies at a low price, earning 9,000 yuan, approximately $1,400. Police suspected that this might have inadvertently been revealed, giving criminals evil intentions. Police immediately investigated how this money was spent and who knew about it. One detail caught their attention. When a relative of Mr. Xiang passed away, he had attended the funeral and given 1,000 to 2,000 yuan, $150 to $300, in condolence money. Locally, condolence money was usually just a few hundred yuan, but because this relative had helped Mr. Xiang's family tremendously, he had given more. Could someone have seen this action and thought Mr. Xiang's family had recently become prosperous, thus developing robbery intentions? Although many people attended the funeral, police tried to find witnesses to determine who might have seen Mr. Xiang giving money. However, after a thorough investigation, the results were still disappointing. 3 or 4 people testified that when Mr. Xiang gave money, he had pulled the relative aside to give it privately, not directly giving money publicly. This meant the money had not been revealed to outsiders. Although they still hadn't found any direct clues, through multiple rounds of investigation and combining with crime scene characteristics, police realized that to commit this crime, the suspect needed to have 2 main characteristics. First, not understanding the victim family's economic situation clearly, but second, being very familiar with their house structure. These seemingly contradictory characteristics made police think of one group of people: the workers who had participated in building the house for Mr. Xiang's family. They would certainly be very familiar with the house structure, but because they weren't from the same village, they might not know about Mr. Xiang's difficult economic circumstances. Mr. Xiang's family had used the 9,000 yuan earned to pay for construction materials and worker wages. Police began checking each worker who had worked for Mr. Xiang's house, from painters to builders to carpenters. Could the perpetrator be one of them? Police started with Joe, the painter, who had worked for Mr. Xiang's family for a while and was also the first to receive wages. Joe still clearly remembered the amount Mr. Xiang had paid him was 2,845 yuan, and Mr. Xiang had to pay exactly 2,800 because he didn't have change. When asked about the night the crime occurred, Joe had a solid alibi. Next, police successively met with the builders and carpenters who had built Mr. Xiang's house. However, all of them had clear alibis and no motive for the crime. At this time, Lihuan police received important news. From the blood-stained glove left at the scene, they had extracted a suspicious DNA sample, possibly from the perpetrator. Police immediately took blood samples from all the workers to compare with this DNA. However, the final results showed that none of the workers matched the DNA from the scene. The perpetrator remained a mystery, leaving police extremely puzzled. Time passed, and it had been over 50 hours since the crime occurred. Had the suspect already fled the area? The police began to feel anxious and disappointed as the golden time for solving the case was gradually passing. They wondered if their investigation direction was wrong. In a mood of deadlock and self-blame, the investigators once again returned to the hospital to visit Xiaoyang. They chatted with Xiaoyang, trying to help him temporarily forget the physical and mental pain. However, during this conversation, an unexpected detail was revealed. Xiaoyang mentioned that when the house was being built, there was a worker who often chatted with him like this. Xiaoyang's account made the investigators suddenly realize that during their investigation of workers who built Mr. Xiang's house, they had never seen anyone of the age that Xiaoyang described as the worker brother. Had they missed someone? Immediately, the investigators went back to meet Joe, the painter. Joe remembered that during the final stage of construction, his nephew named Joe Jun, 21 years old, occasionally came to help him for a few days, sometimes 3 to 4 days, sometimes 2 days. Joe Jun was from the same village as Joe and had only been learning painting for about 3 months. Joe recalled that when Mr. Xiang's family paid him wages, Joe Jun was also present at the scene. Mr. Xiang had counted money in front of Joe, but Joe didn't know how much was left. This detail immediately made police highly suspicious of Joe Jun. Could he be that cruel perpetrator? Joe insisted that Joe Jun was a very honest, shy young man who didn't even dare to compete for work or eat with the homeowners. He was described as an introverted and quiet person. When police went to Joe Jun's village, just a few kilometers from Mr. Xiang's house, they met with village officials to learn about him. Everyone described Joe Jun as a quiet person who rarely spoke to strangers. This made police even more curious about his true nature. Police decided they had to meet Joe Jun directly to observe his reactions. Upon first contact, police found Joe Jun to be a very quiet young man with a reclusive lifestyle. When asked where he was on the night of January 2nd, Joe Jun answered definitively that he was at an internet cafe from 8 p.m. until 1 a.m. the next morning. He claimed he continuously played games until the morning of January 3rd before going home. Hearing this, police immediately went to the internet cafe Joe Jun had mentioned and requested surveillance footage. The video showed that Joe Jun had indeed been there playing games. However, when checking surveillance cameras outside the cafe, police discovered an important detail. The video showed he had left the cafe at 8 p.m. on January 2nd and only returned at 11 p.m. the same day. This meant there was a 3-hour gap during which Joe Jun was not present at the internet cafe. This time period coincided with the time the murder occurred as determined by autopsy results, between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. on January 2nd. Could this be a random coincidence? Police continued investigating and extracted surveillance footage from nearby traffic control points. In one video, they saw Joe Jun riding a motorcycle. The camera images clearly showed his direction of travel, and the direction he went was toward Mr. Xiang's family's village. The coincidence of time and location, combined with his special role, a worker who had worked at Mr. Xiang's house and knew about the family having money, made suspicion about Joe Jun increase significantly. He possessed all 3 characteristics of the perpetrator. First, he was very familiar with the victim's house structure. Second, he knew about the victim family having money. And third, most importantly, he had complete conditions of time and space to be present at the crime scene. Police once again sought out Joe Jun, and this time, they told him shocking news. They revealed that Xiang, the boy who had chatted with him when the house was being built, was still alive and had regained consciousness, with his memory also returning to normal. Police bluntly told him that all 3 people in the victim family had been severely injured by a hammer, 2 had died on the spot, but Xiang had not died and was now conscious. They emphasized that he had worked at Xiaoyang's house for a long time, and all 3 family members were familiar with his face. Hearing these words, Joe Jun lowered his head, fell silent, and said nothing more. Police immediately took his blood sample and sent it to the forensic lab for comparison. At this point, faced with irrefutable evidence, Joe Jun finally admitted that he was the one who had killed Mr. Xiang and his wife. When Joe Jun was led away, his mother couldn't believe this harsh reality. She couldn't accept that her son, who had been gentle and shy, who couldn't even bear to see blood, could commit such a heinous crime. So what had transformed a shy young man like Joe Jun into a cruel killer? In the interrogation room, Joe Jun began to tell his story. According to him, everything perhaps began with his family. He confided that from a very young age, he had never felt love or care from his father. This made him always carry feelings of inferiority and deep pain. He remembered going to school, where his classmates all had parents paying school fees, but he didn't. His father never cared about his education. As he grew older, Joe Jun increasingly witnessed the relationship between his parents deteriorating. His father frequently beat his mother, even causing her injuries all over her body. A few years ago, Joe Jun's parents divorced. This divorce made him even more disappointed in family, because whether his parents were together or not, he still felt no affection from his father. Jo-jun's mother also expressed helplessness about her son's psychological state. She noticed that from childhood, Jo-jun had a poor mood, was quite withdrawn, and rarely spoke. She thought he was just young and didn't understand things, and she didn't have many opportunities to care for and manage her son because his father constantly caused trouble. Jo-jun had average academic performance, just barely scoring enough to enter a vocational school after graduating middle school. However, he only attended for a few months before dropping out because he felt no interest. His mother believed that the unhappy family environment had negatively affected his studies. Later, Jo-jun worked as a laborer outside for a while, but his mother worried he was too young to endure hardship, so she called him back home. With nothing to do at home, Jo-jun began immersing himself in the virtual world of online games, especially violent and bloody games. He gradually sank deep into that virtual world, sometimes playing continuously for 4 to 5 days without rest. Jo-jun's mother didn't know what games her son was playing, and communication between mother and son was very limited. She felt her son was becoming increasingly quiet and silent, and her advice had no effect. The lack of communication and his father's indifference pushed Jo-jun further from reality. He was like a lost child, with no one to guide him. A year earlier, Jo-jun had begun learning painting from his Uncle Joe. Each time they completed a project, he could earn a few hundred wen. However, all this money was spent on gaming. On January 2nd, Jo-jun had played games all day at the internet cafe. By evening, he didn't have much money left in his pocket. He left the cafe and rode his motorcycle home. Although he was out of money, he still wasn't satisfied with the games and craved more money to continue immersing himself in the virtual world. At this moment, Jo-jun suddenly thought of Mr. Xiang's family. He remembered seeing Mr. Xiang pay wages to Jo, and seeing that Mr. Xiang still had several thousand wen left. When passing by Mr. Xiang's house, he remembered he had worked there a few months ago, so he was very familiar with the house structure, surrounding environment, and even the family's daily habits. He thought that Mr. Xiang's family usually slept soundly after a hard day's work, so it would be easy to carry out his intentions. So Jo-jun decided to break into Mr. Xiang's house. He didn't dare use the front door, but climbed through the rear window to the rooftop. He waited until Mr. Xiang's family turned off the lights and went to sleep. After ensuring everything was quiet, he snuck down to the first floor and searched everywhere but found no money. Then he went up to the second floor, into Mr. and Mrs. Xiang's bedroom. Along the way, he conveniently picked up a flashlight and a hammer. Actually, his intentions were already very clear. Bringing the hammer wasn't just to pry cabinets or break safes, but also to prepare for the case of being discovered. He would use it to attack. When he had just entered the bedroom, Mrs. Zhou, who was lying in bed, suddenly turned and looked toward him. He was terrified, thinking that Mrs. Zhou had seen him and would scream, causing him to be discovered. In that moment, Jo-jun completely lost control. He acted like he was in a frenzy, behaving as if he were playing a game, swinging the hammer to attack Mr. and Mrs. Xiang. He admitted that at that time he was too obsessed with games, had fallen into a kind of hallucination, feeling like he was playing a game and attacking characters in the game. After the attack, Jo-jun continued searching everywhere for money, but he had no idea that the 9,000 wen Mr. Xiang's family had earned had already been used to pay off all the house construction debts. In the victim's house, he found not a single penny. Finding nothing, he threw the hammer on the floor, then returned the way he had broken in. He went up to the rooftop and jumped down from the house foundation. In his panic, he dropped the flashlight and gloves at the scene. Then he rode his motorcycle back to the internet cafe and continued playing games until the next morning before going home. After some time imprisoned, he expressed deep remorse for his actions. He realized how much his mother was suffering, and the victim's family was certainly suffering much more. He wished he could go back 15 years, when his parents hadn't divorced yet, when his mother only did simple farm work, and his father still grew cactus. He longed for a normal, happy family home. After the trial, Jo-jun was sentenced to death. After some time, Xiaoyang was discharged from the hospital and taken in by family members for care. Although his physical wounds had basically healed, The pain and psychological trauma from losing his parents in that horrific night would haunt him for life. This saddened the entire community, and local residents voluntarily donated money to help Xiang, hoping to somewhat ease the enormous loss the boy had to bear. As for Zhou Jun, his mother couldn't believe that her son, who had been gentle and shy, who couldn't even bear to see blood, could commit such a heinous crime. She was severely shocked by this harsh reality. The image of her son had completely collapsed. The case is a tragic story and also a profound warning about many pressing social issues. Zhou Jun's story serves as a painful example showing how the absence of love, domestic violence, and cracks in marriage can leave deep psychological scars in a child's soul. Zhou Jun had not experienced a complete childhood, never felt love from his father, and had to witness violence in the family. All of this gnawed at his tender soul from childhood, shaping a personality full of inferiority complexes and distortions, gradually pushing him onto the path of crime. At the same time, this case also points out the immeasurable danger of immersing oneself in virtual worlds, especially violent games. When a person, particularly young people with unstable psychology, lacks guidance and strict management and becomes too deeply immersed in virtual worlds, the boundary between reality and fantasy can become blurred, making their emotions callous. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next videos.